All right, strap in, everyone, because today we're going deep, really deep into a group that's generated quite a bit of buzz, shall we say? The Science of Identity Foundation, SIF for short.
Yeah, SIF. Definitely a group with a mixed reputation.
That's putting it mildly from what I've seen.
Yeah, some people see it as like this spiritual sanctuary, a place to find enlightenment and all that. Others, well, they use much stronger words.
Definitely. And from the mountain of research you sent over, articles, forum posts, even court documents, it seems like getting a clear picture of SIF. It's like, I don't know, trying to assemble a puzzle, but someone swapped out half the pieces for like pieces from a completely different puzzle.
Right. Like, good luck figuring this one out.
Exactly. But I guess that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're gonna wade through all of this, separate fact from fiction, try to understand how SIF operates, especially the role of the leader, Chris Butler, and the impact of his teachings.
Okay, so let's start with Chris Butler himself. I mean, where do we even begin with this guy? Seems like a bit of a chameleon, changing his name multiple times over the years. First Chris Butler, then Siddhaswarupanna Paramahamsa, and now Jagadguru Siddhaswarupanna Paramahamsa.
Yeah, you've hit on something really important there, those name changes. It's not just a rebranding exercise. These names, they carry weight, especially in a group like this. I mean, think about it. Jagadguru. That implies he's a universal teacher, right? Places him above any questioning or doubt.
It's like he's setting himself up as like this infallible figure.
Exactly.
Which makes you wonder what happens to those who dare to question him. Especially when you have accounts from former members claiming he demanded like excessive personal service. And we're not talking like, someone bringing him a cup of tea. We're talking multiple kitchen servants preparing over 35 meals a day for him.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. And it gets even, weirder, frankly. Some former members have even said, and this is going to sound crazy, but they allege they were told to consume his toenails and foot water, like as a sign of devotion.
Okay, that's just bizarre. What's the logic behind something like that?
Well, it's hard to say for sure, but some experts suggest this kind of, extreme behavior could be a way to break down resistance, to make followers completely subservient.
Right, because if you're willing to do something like that, you're basically saying, I'll do anything you ask.
Exactly.
It's a pretty messed up way to test loyalty.
No kidding.
It makes you wonder what kind of, psychological pressure people must be under to go along with something like that.
Absolutely. And then there's the content of his teachings themselves. Reincarnation, the concept of the soul, the path to spiritual enlightenment. On the surface, it sounds pretty standard for a spiritual group, right?
Right, yeah. Nothing too out there.
Right. But then you dig a little deeper and you find things like his assertion that women, they need a husband to achieve spiritual advancement.
Whoa, okay, that's just straight up reinforcing traditional gender roles and putting women in a subordinate position. It makes you question, is this really about spiritual enlightenment, or is it about controlling people's lives, especially women's lives?
Yeah, and it becomes even more, I guess questionable is the word, when you consider allegations that Butler, he actually condoned polygamy amongst his male followers.
So we're starting to see a pattern here, right? A lot of control exerted through teachings, these bizarre rituals. But what about daily life for SIF members? What are the actual rules and expectations?
Well, one thing that really stands out from the research is the dress code. Apparently, Butler, he instructs followers to dress like quote-unquote materialists to, blend in with mainstream society.
That's kind of ironic considering, the whole rejecting materialism thing.
Right. Talk about a mixed message.
It's like leading a double life almost.
Yeah. And then there's the restrictions on contact with the outside world. Former members describe being, strongly discouraged from interacting with people outside of SIF. And Butler reportedly went as far as dictating marriages and even divorces. He's controlling who people could and couldn't be with.
Wow. Okay, that level of control over personal choices,
right.
That's really intense. It's like every aspect of your life revolves around SIF and what Butler dictates.
Right.
And then of course, there's the financial angle.
Oh, yeah.
We've got allegations of unpaid labor in SIF-run businesses, pressure to donate, and even links to this controversial multi-level marketing company called QNet. Have you heard of this?
Oh, QNet. Yeah, QNet's been accused of being essentially a pyramid scheme and has faced legal trouble in several countries. The fact that SIF members are reportedly so heavily involved, it definitely raises some red flags, especially when it comes to, potential financial exploitation.
So what we're seeing here is this web of control, right? It extends beyond just beliefs.
Oh, absolutely.
It impacts finances, relationships, pretty much every facet of a person's life.
Yeah.
And it all seems to stem from Chris Butler.
He's at the center of it all. Like, understanding him is key to understanding, the inner workings of stuff.
But here's what really, really gets me. What happens to those who choose to leave? We've got some pretty disturbing stories about shunning and ostracism.
Yeah, shunning. That's where the true cost of this control becomes, well, really heartbreaking. Imagine, being completely cut off from your family, your friends, everyone you know, just because you decided to leave SIF. I mean, the emotional toll has got to be immense.
It's not just like, a little distance or awkwardness at family gatherings. We're talking about parents being shunned by their own children, siblings who no longer speak. It's like being, I don't know, completely erased from their lives.
Right. It's brutal.
It's really hard to fathom.
And it's how they ensure compliance, right? The fear of losing your whole community, your whole support system, that's a powerful weapon.
Yeah, it's a powerful deterrent, that's for sure. It makes you wonder what kind of internal conflict people must experience.
Yeah.
Like seeing these inconsistencies, wanting to leave, but also being absolutely terrified of the consequences.
Right. You're caught between a rock and a hard place. Because we do see these examples of Butler behaving in ways that directly contradict, the principles he preaches. How do people reconcile that?
Yeah, it's baffling. Like how do you square those two things in your mind?
Well, that's where this concept of cognitive dissonance comes in. It's basically this psychological coping mechanism where people rationalize contradictory beliefs and actions to avoid, like, mental discomfort.
So they might, like, downplay Butler's flaws or focus on the good parts of their experience in SIF or just flat out ignore the contradictions.
Exactly. It's like they have to convince themselves that everything's okay to survive in that environment.
Wow. That's really, really powerful. But also, like, incredibly damaging, right? In the long run, I mean.
Oh, absolutely. It prevents them from seeing the situation clearly and from getting the help they might need.
It's a tough situation all around. I feel like we've only scratched the surface here, but we're already seeing how complex and potentially harmful this whole SIF situation is.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack, and we haven't even touched on their political involvement yet. That's a whole other layer to this story that we'll need to unravel.
Okay, so we've seen how Chris Butler exerts control within SIF through his teachings and, well, those unconventional practices, let's call them. But now I'm curious, like, does this control extend beyond the group itself?
Right, because the sources you sent over, they hint at some pretty serious political involvement, especially in Hawaii.
Yeah, Hawaii seems to be a bit of a hot spot for SIF.
It is, and that's where things get even more, well, I guess you could say interesting. SIF, they have a history of backing certain political candidates, particularly in Hawaii. And the family that seems most entangled with SIF is the Gabbard family. Mike Gabbard, who's a state senator, and his daughter Tulsi, who you might remember was a U.S. representative and even ran for president.
The Gabbards, right. Yeah, I remember hearing about Tulsi Gabbard and some controversy surrounding her connection to this guru figure. But it all seemed pretty vague back then.
Yeah, well, it's anything but vague when you look at the information we have. Mike and his wife, Carol, they've been longtime followers of Chris Butler. There were even reports that Mike sought initiation from Butler, though he later denied actually being a disciple. And Tulsi, she's acknowledged Butler as her guru dev. That's a term used in Hinduism to refer to, like, a revered spiritual teacher.
Okay, so there's definitely a connection there. But what about Tulsi? Has she said anything about her current involvement with SIF?
She's been less clear about that. It's all very hush-hush, which, makes you wonder even more about the nature of their relationship with SIF.
Right, like what are they not telling us? But what specifically about the Gabbard's political activities has raised eyebrows, besides just their connection to Butler?
Well, for starters, Mike Gabbard, he was initially a Republican, but he switched to the Democratic Party shortly after being elected to the state Senate.
Really? Okay, so he pulls a political 180 like that. That's pretty bold.
Yeah.
Definitely makes you wonder about the motivations behind it.
Right. And some speculate that SIF might have actually orchestrated this move to gain more influence within the Democratic Party.
Wow, that's a pretty big allegation. And what about Tulsi Gabbard? Any connections between her political stances and SIF's influence?
One notable example is her very vocal defense of Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India.
Oh, Modi, yeah. He's a controversial figure to say the least.
He is. He's been criticized for his Hindu nationalist agenda and his treatment of religious minorities. And given SIF's own, Hindu-centric beliefs, Tulsi's, unwavering support for Modi has definitely fueled speculation about the group's influence on her foreign policy views.
Yeah, it's a connection that definitely raises questions. And then there's the issue of campaign contributions, right? I remember reading that a good chunk of Mike Gabbard's campaign funds came from SIF members.
That's right. And it raises some serious concerns about potential conflicts of interest. I mean, if a politician is heavily reliant on a religious group for financial support, can they truly make independent decisions, or are they, beholden to the group's agenda?
Right. It makes you question the whole concept of separation of church and state.
Exactly.
Which is like a cornerstone in democracy, right?
It is, and that's why this whole SIF story is so important. It's not just about one group or one family. It's about recognizing the subtle ways in which religious beliefs can seep into the political sphere and potentially undermine democratic processes.
Okay, so we've got this whole web of influence, right? With Chris Butler at the center, controlling his followers' lives and potentially using that control to gain political power. It's a pretty disturbing picture, especially when you consider what happens to those who try to leave.
Right, and we've talked about shunning, but let's really dive into the human cost of this practice. I mean, imagine being told you're no longer worthy of love or connection just because you decided to leave SIF. It's like being erased from the lives of the people you care about most.
And it's more than just personal relationships, right? From what I've read, former members have reported being denied access to their own children, losing jobs, and SIF-affiliated businesses, even facing harassment from current members.
It's a form of social and emotional isolation that can be incredibly damaging. It creates this climate of fear that prevents people from speaking out or seeking help, even when they're deeply unhappy or experiencing abuse.
It's a really, really messed up situation, and it makes you wonder, how do people still in SIF, how do they rationalize this behavior? How do they square the idea of like loving and compassionate spirituality with the cruelty of shunning?
It's a complex issue, and there's likely different answers for different individuals. Some might genuinely believe that shunning is necessary, a way to protect the group from negative influences. Others may simply be too afraid to challenge the status quo, fearing they'll be shunned themselves if they show any dissent.
So it's like a cycle of fear and silence.
Exactly.
And breaking free from that takes immense courage. It makes me think about those who have managed to leave SIF. What kind of challenges do they face in rebuilding their lives?
Leaving SIF, it's not just about physically walking away. It's about unraveling years of indoctrination and rebuilding your entire worldview. Imagine having to reevaluate everything you once believed in, confronting the cognitive dissonance you had to employ to survive in that environment. It's a long and painful process.
And on top of that, they're dealing with the trauma of being shunned, the loss of their community, their support system. It's like having to start your life over from scratch without the people you thought you could rely on.
Exactly, and that's why it's so crucial to have resources and support systems in place for those who leave groups like SIF. They need understanding, empathy, and guidance to navigate this incredibly difficult transition.
It's a reminder that the impact of SIF, it extends far beyond its members. It ripples out into families, communities, and society as a whole. And it highlights the need for greater awareness and understanding of how how these groups operate and the potential harm they can cause.
And it's not just about SIF, right? This pattern of control, manipulation, and exploitation. It can be found in various groups and organizations, whether they're religious, political, or even seemingly benign social clubs.
So it's about recognizing the warning signs, understanding the psychology of influence and being able to protect ourselves and those we care about from falling prey to these tactics.
Exactly. And we'll delve deeper into those aspects in part 3, where we'll explore the psychological and social factors that make people vulnerable to groups like SIF and discuss the challenges of helping loved ones who might be entangled in these organizations.
You know, through all this digging into SIF, I keep coming back to this one question. Why? Why would anyone knowing what we know now about the level of control, the demands, why would anyone join a group like SIF in the first place?
Yeah, it's the age-old question, isn't it? Why do people join cults? and there's no easy answer, of course.
Right.
But psychologists and sociologists, they've identified some common threads, things that often lead people down this path.
So let's untangle those threads. Like what actually makes someone vulnerable to a group like F? Is it just about being gullible, naive?
It's rarely that simple. Often it starts with a sense of searching, like a yearning for something more. Could be spiritual seeking, a desire to belong, even just needing answers to life's big questions.
Yeah, that makes sense. And SIFIC, I mean, they seem to offer all that, right? A path to enlightenment, a tight-knit community, and a charismatic leader who claims to have all the answers. It's like a one-stop shop for meaning and purpose.
Exactly. And for someone who's feeling lost, disillusioned, that can be incredibly appealing. They might be drawn to the structure and the certainty that SIF provides, the promise of a better life, both spiritually and materially.
But then once they're in, all those control tactics we talked about, they kick in. The shunning, the financial pressure, the isolation, it all reinforces their dependence on the group and makes it that much harder to actually leave.
It becomes this self-perpetuating cycle. The more isolated and dependent they become, the more they need the group to validate their choices, their beliefs, and that's how they end up, trapped, even when they start to see the cracks in the facade.
It's like they've invested so much emotionally, financially, socially that leaving it feels like losing everything. So what can be done to help people in this situation? Like what if someone suspects their loved one is involved in a group like SIF?
That's a tough one, and there are no easy answers. Direct confrontation, a lot of times it backfires. Challenging their beliefs or trying to force them to leave, it's likely just gonna push them further into the group's embrace.
So what's the best approach then? Is there even a way to reach someone who's so deeply entrenched in this kind of mindset?
It's about patience. It's about empathy. It's about open communication, expressing concern without judgment. That's key. Letting them know you love them, you support them, regardless of their beliefs. Creating a bridge instead of building walls.
It's about giving them a safe space to share their experiences, to maybe start questioning their doubts without fear of rejection.
Right.
It sounds like a very delicate dance, though.
It is, and seeking guidance from professionals who specialize in cult intervention and recovery, that can be invaluable. There are organizations and therapists who can provide support and resources for both the individual and their loved ones.
Well, that's reassuring to know. It's a reminder that you don't have to deal with this alone. There's help out there, and there is hope for recovery. But it makes me think about the people who do manage to leave. Like what's that process like for them?
Leaving a group like SIF, it's just the first step. It's a long and challenging journey. They have to process the trauma of their experience, rebuild their support networks, and essentially relearn how to navigate the world outside the confines of the group.
Yeah, because they've had their entire worldview shaped by SIF.
Yeah.
To deprogram from that, to start thinking critically and independently again. That must be a monumental undertaking.
It is, and there's often, guilt and shame to unpack. They might blame themselves for getting involved, for staying as long as they did, for the harm it might have caused to themselves or to others.
It's like having to rebuild your life, your identity from the ground up. It's a testament to human resilience that anyone manages to do it.
Their stories are incredibly powerful. They remind us that it is possible to break free from these systems of control and to find healing and fulfillment outside of them.
This whole deep dive into SIF has been, well, it's been a wild ride, to be honest. It's been eye-opening, thought-provoking, and at times downright disturbing. But if there's one thing I'm taking away from this, it's the importance of critical thinking.
Couldn't agree more. It's about questioning everything, especially when it comes to charismatic leaders and groups that promise easy answers and absolute truths. Being able to think for ourselves, to evaluate information, make informed decisions. That's our best defense against falling prey to these kinds of systems.
It's a skill. It's a skill we all need to cultivate, not just for ourselves, but for our loved ones in our communities, because as we've seen with SUF, the impact of these groups, it can be far-reaching and devastating.
Well said. So to our listener, if there's one thing you remember from this deep dive, let it be this: stay curious, stay critical, and always be willing to question the narratives you're presented with.
Until next time, keep diving deep.